tēnā tātou. Ko mihi a ngā mihi, era tēnei tū mai ki te mihi anu. And thank you for the introduction. And also to you, Colleen. It's not that we take precedence over each other as to why I'm speaking first. We know each other very, very well. We share the same tribal environment is the term, I suppose. And there's something about the term, what's that term, raconteur or something? Rapporteur. I got up this morning at about 4 o'clock, and adopted the Socratic pose. That means you bend over like this and contemplate the pito. I said pito. Anyway, when you get a bit older, it is sometimes more difficult to find than when you were younger. So having come to that rather profound conclusion, the thing that was going through my mind, people at iwi, was that word very similar to another word, and it resounded through my thinking at that stage with raccoon. And then, having got that in my head, I then proceeded to try and make some relationship between that word rapporteur and raccoon. Hey, there's a message here somewhere. And I came to a commentary, having accepted that divine intervention about what I should think about, which is a raccoon. I then set about trying to analyse the possibilities as to why. This is what I came up with. It is a highly intelligent, entrepreneurial, creative, and it is. It has learned how to operate in foreign environments that are removed from its traditional environment. It's able to manipulate that environment to the extent that it not only survives and flourishes, but because of its adaptability, it's able to overcome inherent disadvantages. If you don't believe me, watch Our World. And has a resilience against the odds. So in a foreign, contemporary environment, they not only survive, but they flourish. And the other thing is, in that environment, they don't make the rules. Rather, in my view, they are shapeshifters, and they've moved from one paradigm to another. In the context of the kaupapa before us, I find that to be quite extraordinary. Because if we are not any of those things, then we're fronted with a challenge. If the raccoon has incredible abilities to adapt, if they are creative and they're proven to be able to manipulate their environment, what about us? Koe nā, the first lesson. And I suppose it can be encapsulated. I like what we call wakataukitanga kōrero, which is, of course, looking, someone said, to the past, that provides inspiration for the present and then ngā uarai amua. I've chosen a tribal Wakatauki tanga kōrero, and it goes like this. Wakaraupo I a koutou e te iwi. Ki te riri mai te au ki a koutou, ka piko. Ka mutu te riri o te au ki a koutou, ka tuanō. That actually encapsulates our collective history as Māori. What are the kind of inherent qualities that we require and still do? You've got to have courage. You've got to have almost a life commitment against the odds. And other qualities that we all do have. Our history as a people is littered with examples of those kinds of values. And when we are talking about shifting the paradigm, it is very critical, I believe, to draw on those examples that are part of our history. And I was just talking to the Vice and others about their treaty claims process. What it requires, if you ever go through that process, is resilience, adaptability, and how to be creative in circumstances that are not favourable. You can apply those themes and those principles to the kaupapa o te rānei. One of the things that's resounded with some of the presenters is some sort of synopsis from whence they came. Both Colleen and I share a common background, I suppose. For where we come from, we've come through a searing experience of complete cultural, social, and economic devastation, which has had an extraordinary effect mai te hunga ka witi ki te wānau, ki te hapu, ki te iwi. Where we were grounded, both of us, was, of course, kei raro I te maunga tito ea a taranaki, I runga te marae o Pariaka. And I'm not saying other people have not had the same experience. But what I'm saying is we share varying degrees of that experience. And it's from those kinds of experiences that we should take and distill those things that are necessary in the go forward. That was about probably a totally marginal existence based on survival, not the acquisition of material wealth, but rather the ability to survive. And that's, I suppose, is a common experience that is shared that shapes us. The challenge is, how do we emerge from it? Well, like other people in the audience today, there have been personal interventions. And those personal interventions are Maori-based, not tribal. I suppose the first major intervention external was from Ka'anungu, Canon Wihuata, who was instrumental in rescuing me from a path, early path, adolescent, of self-destruction and the ultimate statistic as guest of the Crown in some kind of place over there on the hill in New Plymouth. So I'm grateful to Kaanunga. You heard what Api said in my absence this morning. I met Api at Pipitea a few decades ago. He was actually the, what do you call him, Chaplin. And Api used to make sure to coerce us every Sunday to go to church in the chapel, and every Sunday night, plus every bloody morning of the week, plus every afternoon of the week. It was kind of like a kind of regime of Christianity under coercion. There he would wax forth on the principle of forgiveness. He would talk about the principle of forgiveness and how absolutely critical that was to our little community at Pipitea. Often he'd finish his sermon by naming people who committed varying degrees of crime against the state, to be dealt with summarily in a little room round the corner. For an adolescent like me, I found that absolutely confusing. I did not decipher in any way possible that he would transform into one of our foremost leaders. So people, the message there is hope. But it's transformative. And some of you sitting around here have personal knowledge of Pipitea. I met Api later when, because of an overriding curiosity, I decided to enrol myself in White Man's Bastion at Massey University, more out of curiosity than any commitment to intellectual pursuit. And there he was again. Afterwards, I met him during my brief political sojourn, again in the political arena. So he is one of those I've talked about who committed his life to his people. And that needs to be applauded because a hell of a lot of other people do it as well. Then we have Sir Hugh Kawharu of the same establishment. It's the first time I ever met an Oxbridge-educated Maori. Suitably impressed I was when I could understand what he was talking about. He then was the foundation professor of Maori studies and anthropology at Massey. And then morphed, I'll say that word quote unquote in the most polite way possible, into a leader of his people in Ngāti Whātua. And then, not to be agenda biased, I actually did spend some time at a teachers' college institution, but was there more for what teachers' college could offer off the curriculum than I was interested in any principles about teacher training. I see some of you went to the same teachers' college. And was there another intervention by a person called Frank Davis and his wife, Wana. Absolutely critical, because amongst the four Maoris that were there, men, the best way to read the results of any examination was not to start at the top, but start up the bottom going upwards. And then resit a numerous of the same examination paper. Suffice to say that three of those Maori men, I'll just talk about the men, there was some women there too, by the way, became in their time principals of quite large intermediates. You see, we can't make judgments too early. There were other interventions, and what I'm saying is we all travel the journey. What the key message I'm trying to portray here is that they were non-tribally related to me. That is a key principle, I believe, in terms of the kaupapa that we are pursuing collectively on behalf of our whānau and our children going forward. I commend the kaupapa. So, while the way forward, and whilst we have a very distinctive tribal identity sharpened by the policy of treaty settlements, the inspiration going forward, from my point of view, the basic principle hasn't changed. On that basis, I need to say something else. I acknowledge and respect the intrinsic strength, drive and leadership of our Queen. And I talk only about Taranaki iwi in this case, because amongst other things, at the pāhuatanga o Parihaka and the consequent illegal incarceration of our men, it was to the woman that fell the responsibility of sustaining our families. So, I'm sure Colleen would agree, we have a culture of very strong women. That got me into a lot of trouble when I was a minister under Clark, because I didn't measure her the same way, even in spite of constant rejoinders to do so. Especially when one was faced with rather intimidating postures. And women today continue that tradition. Going forward, I think Tariana touched on it this morning. She has inverted the paradigm. The imposition externally is not as powerful and as strong as the intrinsic motivation of our people pointing outwards. We have examples within our collective society at te iwi of resilience, commitment and belief. Most of what we have achieved as a people has not depended on external political intervention. We look not only to the past, the present, to the future. We look within ourselves, ki te puna e kora pūpū ana, e kora pūpū ana, e kora e mimiti. In our journey, we have had messianic movements as a response to colonialism. And we can name those people. In Taranaki, we had sustained open warfare that lasted for 27 years. Followed by a 5-year occupation of Parihaka by the colonial forces that resulted in the intervention of our whakapapa. We have a wakataukitanga kōrero that the prisoners who came back from being incarcerated said something about the speckled taiwa that ran around the marae. The speckled taiwa, of course, are the children of mixed parentage, often by force. I've talked to her queer about that, seriously, which resulted in them not being able to have any further children. Devastating. But we are here, aren't we? That's the question. The intervention of the young Maori party, and we know about those people. huge, critical, at a time in our history when we were supposed to sort of go to the pillow and die. What would have happened if that didn't occur? So we have them, Apiringana, Ngata, Mabu, Pomare, Tarangi Hiro, Sir Trudy Carroll and others. Huge influence. Post-war. If we talk about te reo, we must also talk about Ngā Tamato. Have to. These are the shift shapers. These are the people that force the paradigm shift. We can do it as well. And of course, that hikoi around the land. I'm not talking about foreshore and seabed. I can recollect that fully in all its impact. Then we have ko angareo, and you've heard a very good address e te onanga, waka huatia ngā kōrero. And now we have the beginnings of an economic, cultural and social assertiveness. We did a deal, and I can't tell you who we did a deal with. I'm part of the settlement trust here as well. You know, years ago, not that many years ago, we had to go to the bank and beg on our knees for Pipitea to do worthy things. Today, the banks are lining up to do business with us. That may not seem to be such a climatic change in behaviour, but it is. Are they being like the opportunistic raccoon? Because if they are, there are also raccoons on this side, and the cut is, what's good for you has got to be good for us. In that scenario, along with that assertiveness, comes challenges for us and challenges for the mainstream. I sort of anticipate that as we strengthen our families, as we move forward, as we become more and more significant across the economic, social, cultural spectrum, there's going to be a mainstream response. Whatever we do that is good for the communities that we live in, it's also good for the wider communities as well. There is a change that is asserting itself, in my view, that will become, in my view as well, more and more evident. And I call that our transformative stage, so this kaupapa in itself is part of that. This morning, I used the phrase, I think, and it went like ngā tō ai o te piki tūrangi. That is a phrase that we use to describe people who gather around them the following of all people, i runga i te kaupapa, irrespective of what their kaupapa might be. And I think that the legacy is not always negative. Ad nauseum do we hear about the negative legacies. There are also, to balance it, very positive legacies that you as young people will stand to inherit. So we are celebrating that today. Hopefully it will be part of a positive legacy going forward. I am extraordinarily encouraged, not quite as the older generation, but getting closer every hour and day that passes. Gives me the advantage of making comparisons from whence we come and then to where do we go. To me, it says something like this: mai te pō ki te awatea. Ko te pō te kaihari I te rā. Ko te mate te kaihari I te oranga. Mate here has nothing to do with dying, hopefully, but we will face and have to overcome obstacles to get where we're going. And I'm grateful, people, that I think we're passing the time when I borrowed this Wakataukitanga kōrero from Africa, when it was that the glories of the hunt were always told by the hunters, until the lions get their own historians. Kia ora mai tātou katoa.